Hello again. My name is Alda Diaz. I am Associate Statistician Officer and I worked in the Climate Change and Environment Statistic Unit here in the Statistic Division. Today we are going to talk about the 2030 Agenda and its demand for environmental indicators. We are going to cover five topics today. The first one is the increased demand for environmental statistics, the global and regional frameworks of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the indicators for global monitoring of the Sustainable Development Goals, and we are going to see the indicators for the global monitoring of Sendai Framework for disaster risk reduction. Finally, we are going to see a decade of action for a change area. It's a perspective of ECLAC, how the regional monitoring should be related to the SDGs and some regional agreements. Let's start. Related to the increased demand for environment statistics, we currently have some dynamics in the environmental statistics, which faces a considerable challenges in terms of statistics measurements for countries, which is an opportunity for the countries to strengthen their capacity and also the challenge because the demand is growing of environmental statistics, and also you can build a lot of indicators. There's huge options that you can choose. For example, and taking into account the national policies. In case of climate change, you can choose indicators related to drivers, impacts, vulnerability, adaptation, mitigation. Also related to biodiversity, you can choose water, forest, disaster risk reduction, energy. There's several topics that also you can choose to talk about the national policies. And finally, the need to develop strength capacity related to the descriptive environment and also the relationship related to the human beings. Well, while comparing the three pillars of sustainable development, monitoring the progress towards environmental sustainability is the weakest, sadly, because it's very hard to compile and to collect all this information, as you know the nature of the data. Another challenge that we have is the monitoring of environmental variables related to the biodiversity and our less developed system of countries. It is not that easily to handle how to monitoring this type of data. Okay, let's see some opportunities for environment statistics. Data collection is a tool for reporting on sustainable development and is necessary for the regular production of environment statistics as a part of the national statistics system. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is the second topic that we are going to see. As you can see in this slide, there is some international agreements very relevant for the Agenda 2030. The first one is the Millennium Development Goals, which was a huge agreement that everyone knows and start in 2000. But before that, even, if you don't believe it, we also have other agreements. The first one was in 1989 related to the International Decade of Natural Disaster Reduction. And then in 1992, we have the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change that founded on this year. In 1994, the Yokohama Strategy and Plan of Action for a Safer World also arise in this year. And in 1999, the Yokohama Strategy and Plan for Action to Save a World has a new and second time to keep working with. The IJO Framework of Action, which was in start in 2005 and then it ends in 2015. It was another interesting agreement internationally. And then in 2013, we have this environment statistics self-assessment tool that came with the framework of statistics and environment indicators. Starting from this year, 2013, everything changed related to the environment statistics. Having the FDS was the base that allows to compile, organized, and systematized some environment statistics. We were needed of this type of methodology. Then in 2015, we have the SDGs. But before that, the Samoa Pathway, COP of Paris 21, arise neither. The Sendai Framework in the same 2015 start with all the methodological and all the decisions that we all know right away. Finally, in 2019, the Escazú agreements arise with very important support of it. Okay, so the 2030 Agenda and the Global Indicator Framework, let's see it in depth. The SDG in 2015 established 231 different indicators that were approved. 7 SDG need environment statistics to measure their goals, and 5 of the SDG need at least one environment statistic to build one of the indicators. Is there a global indicator framework to monitor this agreement? Yes, there are. And the Paris 2015, let's see it. Towards a reduction of greenhouse gas emission limits and the increase in temperature below 2 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial area. A common indicator is the GHG emissions, which is greenhouse gas emissions that I mentioned before. And there is no global framework of climate change adaptation indicators related to the Paris 2021. And the Sendai 2015, we have a risk identification, preparation, occurrence, recovery, and response. Need to develop and strengthen the NSO's capacity to statistically describe extreme events, disasters, and some reductions in resilience also. Let's two more that we are going to see, which is the Samoa 2014, that accelerate modalities actions of and pathway related to the topics of environment and climate change. And for sure, there is no global indicator framework for it. The main focus of the Samoa is the SIDS, the Small Island Developing States, which is a significant number in our region, especially in the Caribbean. Another agenda is the new urban agenda, and there's a majority of the Latin American population that lives in the city, and there's a strong component of resilient cities, water, energy, and urban mobility. Let's go to topic number 3, which is the indicators for global monitoring of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. The environment dimension of the Sustainable Development Goals has 17 objectives and 169 targets and 231 indicators that the whole Agenda 2030 has. Related to environment dimension, we have 93 indicators that corresponded to environment statistics. And then from the 17 objectives, only 12 objectives are related to environment measurements. As you can see in this graphic, The environmental indicator for monitoring the SDG shows that 22 of those indicators have a good progress and has been made a very huge advances for the over last 15 years. However, there is 77% of the environment-related SDG indicators that does not have a sufficient data to assess progress. And it is unlikely that the target of those SDGs upscaling action, which is the rest of 9% of the indicators. As you can see, we need to work harder and try to do our best to increase the data and the indicators related to the environmental field within the Agenda 2030. What are some of the methodological challenges for environment SDG indicators? Well, I don't know if you are very familiarly with the concepts of tier, which is a classification of methodology. For example, we have tier 1 with the methodology exists and the data are available for more than half of the countries. And tier 2, the methodology exists, but the data are available for less than half of the countries. And tier 3, there is no methodology. For sure, when we mention the half of the countries is related to the global of the countries, the 194 countries. So the tier 3 is hard to get, but at least we have some hope to work with tier 1 and tier 2 of those indicators. In the graphic, you can see that the environment-related SDG indicators are by tier, and we focus on how the poverty, the health, education, water, energy, I mean, all of them have, or some of them, have an influence related to the environment fields. Some others haven't. But if you can notice, water, it's the one that have more information because it's easily to have it, and the energy also. But others, like oceans, it's lack of information, and land, we also have it more. But you cannot see here the others indicators related to biodiversity, climate change. So we are lacking of much information, and we need all your support to try to advance as much as we can with the agenda. Okay, more than 30% of the environment-related SDG indicators still do not have an agreed methodology, as you see in the previous slide. In terms of methodological development, a major challenge related to the developing methodology and concepts and definitions, but it needed to provide high quality of information that without requiring a prohibited amount of financial resources will not be able to achieve the goal. In this regard, there is a need to better use the new sources of data, to integrate data coming from surveys, census, and in situ monitoring with citizen science, transnational data, remote census data, data generated by social media, and other forms of new data, because as much data as we can have, as much political intervention can we have in the future. Okay, so you can see in this slide that we can have a scoreboard, global scoreboard on the environmental dimension. You can review it on your own piece. And as you can see, in each of the SDG indicator, you can find the different indicators that are related to environment fields. So you can check and be sure that which of them have a direct or indirect relationship or one of each other. The fourth topic that we are going to speak today is the indicators for the global monitoring of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. We are going to see now the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. This framework will start in 2015 and will end in 2030. There is 7 global goals that has been agreed by member states. Also, the reduction of disaster losses is evaluated in relation to the size of the population and the global for a country. The priorities for action refer to specific public policy for disaster risk management. Explicit links with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and within the UNFCCC, including through the global platform to the HLPF, which is the High Level Political Forum. All of these agendas are linkage between one of other because the objective focus of this framework is reducing existing risk, but also do not generating new risk, and for sure strengthen resilience. Correspondence between SDGs and Sendai indicators. This is the other slide that we are going to see that match the relationship between the Sendai framework for disaster reduction and also the Sustainable Development Goals. As you know, in one we have 7 goals and the other we have 17 goals. And there's some indicators that we are showing that can match for both of the agendas. For example, the proportional of local governments that adopt and implement local disaster risk reduction strategies in line with national risk reduction strategies. Another is the number of deaths, missing persons, and directly to affect persons attributed to disasters per 100,000 population, and some others that you can see in the slide. The final topic that we are going to cover today is a decade of action for a change of area. The perspective of ECLAC, the regional monitoring of the SDGs, and some regional agreements. ECLAC has continued to step up its efforts to assess the progress towards the achievements of Sustainable Development Goals. The need to look beyond per capita GDP as an indicator of development and as set forth of our common agenda. The idea is to complement as much as we can the SDG with aspects that are invisible to the national accounts. For example, the unpaid work, the labor informality, and the deterioration of natural capital. All this must be measured with indicators that adequately reflect the structural gaps, complexity, and heterogeneity of our society. Let's see the regional agreements related to environment, climate change, and disaster, which is the Escazú Agreement that starts in 2019. And this regional agreement on access to information, public participation, and justice in environment matters in Latin America and Caribbean is very important and crucial for all of the Latin American countries because set up a history of giving the opportunity to all to have as much information related to environment that been needed. With this, I finalized my presentation. I hope you have enjoyed and have learned a little bit more related these frameworks and international agreements. Thank you very much and keep going. You are in a very good way to finalize your online course. Thank you.